Hi, welcome to IoT North on this absolutely freezing cold October evening here in the UK. We've got some guests from the US as well as our good friends from the UK as well. IoT North, we're here to share and give you insights in everything and anything to do with IoT. If you'd ever like to talk, please do get in touch by emailing info@iotnorth.com or comment in the platform that you're on, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and this week, Twitter. We're really pleased to have you online. If you have any questions, any thoughts, say hello. By all means, please do so in the comments on whichever platform you're on, and we'll bring it up. Just like Mr. Stavely, who I'm just about to bring in, has just demonstrated very kindly for me. So, hi, John. How are you doing? John's my good colleague here who helps me with everything and keeping me right with IoT North. Great to have you on board. How are you doing, John?
Yeah, good. Yeah, as I was saying earlier, I did my IoT presentation at a local user group last week. First face-to-face meetup in about 2 years now, and I got a Raspberry Pi, doing stuff, sending telemetry back to my mobile device, and then my mobile device telling it to do stuff within like a split second. So it's an interesting demonstration of Azure IoT Hub.
Awesome. Well,
coming to an IoT meetup near you sometime.
Yeah, definitely. I've already been speaking to the Newcastle University guys to do some in-person stuff up here, so we'll have to get you up and join us there. I think that'd be a great demo. And it will be, we'll be getting to Leeds, Manchester, and to the London sites with stuff as well. So anybody who's wanting to present at an in-person show, please do get in touch. We're going to start kicking off at the beginning of next year. So tonight we have Stephen Tulip from ACT. And he's going to be sharing us why you need to consider the standards. Essential patents are a crucial but often overlooked building block of IoT innovation. What are they? Why are they important? And what the risks present to your business? And crucially, what you can do about it. So I'll just bring Stephen in. Hi, Stephen. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, everyone. Really excited to be on it because I'm an exiled northerner myself. I live in Cheltenham, but I'm from Middlesbrough originally. So good to be part of IoT North meeting.
Well, we're global. We're not just North. IoT North has given a direction in IoT, although it was originally founded with the IoT Newcastle and IoT Leeds guys. Just to say hi to Prasad, who's commented there. Thanks, Prasad. Great to have you on board. My good friend Claire Taylor. Hi, Claire. I'm out walking. Great to hear this in the evening instead of morning. Thanks for that. And we have David Tischler from Balena. So many of you who've seen the shows before, we've had David on a couple of times. Always very animated. Great to have David on the show and sharing about Balena. He's just going to give us a good overview of Balena, what its value is to you, and how to use it. Hi, David. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm just happy you keep inviting me back. Are you kidding? And I am, speaking of returning to in-person, I'm with the team for the first time in about 18 months or so. I'm in Seattle right now, so I see Claire's comment about walking in the evening. No, it is the morning here. I'm just having my coffee.
Hey, so we're on a limited time today. Yep. We need to wrap up at 7 o'clock. Stephen's kicking off from the App Association. So, Stephen, if you'd like to share your screen, I'll bring that in.
Yeah. So I think I've done that. Is it working?
It's not coming through, no.
Bear with me a second. Oh, it's coming through. Sorry, guys. I've got a Mac and I'm quite new to it. And basically, there's a lot more security than I'm used to. So,
if you're using the Mac, it's really simple and easy.
It's absolutely not the computer. It's me. Here we are. Security and privacy.
Whilst we wait for that, David, do you want to give a quick intro into yourself and your background whilst Stephen gets himself sorted?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am David Tischler. I'm a developer advocate at Balena, and most people have actually come across Balena when using Etcher to flash a USB stick or an SD card for a Raspberry Pi or similar type of device, Jetson Nano. But what most people don't know is that Balena actually has an IoT fleet management platform, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So we'll show off a couple of tidbits and some open source items as well. What do you think? Stephen, you got that thing
I think
going?
you should fire ahead, David. And,
You want me to just go first?
You do yours,
David.
and then we'll take Stephen on at the 1/2 mark.
We can do
Yeah.
that. We
Right.
can just flip-flop. Not a big deal. I came prepared. Are you kidding?
This is why I always invite you, David. You always save the day.
We'll watch my screen share fail. Let's see what happens.
Never.
Watch it fail on me too. All right, here we go. We're going to give it a try. Paul, if you pull that in.
That's in.
All right, and then go to, bring me side by side if you can. And then Claire says, I work for an American company. I feel your pain. Yeah, I get up early for you Europeans. It's all right. I love it. Love what I do, actually. So let's take it away here. As I was just saying, we are going to talk managing IoT devices at scale, and I'm going to provide you with some open source goodies as well. So let's do this. If I click, here we go. And Paul, as you were mentioning, we are on a limited time today, so I have my contact information here. I'm going to move fast. I'm going to talk like an auctioneer, but if you have any questions, I'll try to get to them at the end. Otherwise, just shoot them my way. I am happy to answer them. It is literally what I do. All right, we were just getting started with who is Balena, and I mentioned Etcher. So if you've used Etcher to flash an SD card, or a USB stick, you've probably come across this and not even known it. But Etcher is an open source utility, and we love that everyone uses it to flash their cards and USB drives, but that doesn't actually pay the bills. What does is Balena Cloud. And Balena Cloud is a web-based management layer, as you can see, to develop, deploy, and manage fleets of connected devices at scale, and makes it easy to go from prototype to production. You build your application in a Docker container, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And when you push it to your device, you do that in bulk. So whether you have one device on your desk or you have 1,000 devices out in the field all over the world, it could be 10,000 devices, could be 100,000 devices, doesn't really matter. What you can do is distribute your workload out to your fleet. Balena Cloud has, you can see here, web-based control, gives you information, gives you sort of a terminal into the devices. You can interact with them, check logs coming off of them, make sure your fleet is healthy, things like that. It's based upon two key components. We'll talk through those pretty quickly. Balena OS and Balena Engine. The OS is our operating system. It's built on Yocto Linux, and the engine is the container runtime. So what do I mean by fleet management? And kind of as I was alluding to here, look, if you have a single Raspberry Pi and it's right here on your desk, you can hook up a keyboard, a mouse, a monitor, you can interact with it, you can do what you need to do. But once you start to move from prototyping on your one device and you get, I don't know, call it 10 devices. I mean, are you really going to put 10 keyboards, 10 monitors, 10 mice on your desk? That gets a little crazy. And then what happens if they're not actually on your desk? What happens if they're literally around the world? Well, now you have a real problem on your hands. So what you do in that scenario then is you use a platform like Balena to view and interact with your devices no matter where they are. So you can see here I have a small little fleet set up. What is the count on that one? Devices 7. So 7 devices there. Fortunately, they're all online. That's good news. And you can then drill into a device to, there it goes, get the metadata coming off of it. You can see, of course, its parameters, CPU, temperature, memory, and storage. You can see there's a little thing there that says logs. Those are live logs streaming off of the device. Terminal is on the right-hand side. You can open up an SSH session to the underlying host operating system, which we'll talk about in a moment, or to individual containers if they happen to have a shell running in them. And you get some other metadata about the devices. You can see where they are located. Balena is a remote-first organization. We have about 100 or so employees. We have offices in Seattle, London, Athens, Galati, Romania, Milan. I think that might be all of them. But so there's certainly clusters of employees in those cities. But again, we have folks all around the world. And so in this one right here, I truly asked some coworkers, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of them around the world to plug in a device and join up to a fleet. And so you can see the devices on the map appearing. Pretty neat, quite honestly. Let's cover that architecture a little bit deeper. Paul, I want to take a quick check, though. Do we have any questions that have rolled in? Let me see here. Do you compete and or integrate with Azure's device provisioning service? The Azure device provisioning service would be a competitor if it's what I think it is. If they are the ones, or if they are in fact managing the device from the bootloader on up and running their own OS, then yes, that would be a competitor. If you're talking more generically about Azure deploying functions into a container, and that container was actually running on a Balena device, you can interact with cloud services. I mean, lots of customers deploy containers that, run an application, but store that application's data in AWS or in an S3 bucket or something like that. So there's a lot of actual crosstalk that is happening between the Balena device and where the end data ends up. I'm not too familiar with Azure's device provisioning service, so I have to go take a little look at that. But yeah, certainly, I mean, AWS has Greengrass, and there's probably a dozen or so competitors out there. And certainly, if they have certain features that meet your needs, then by all means, check them out. All right, let's move on here. And there we go. All right, so I touched on this one pretty quickly, Balena OS. So we build our own operating system. And the reason for that is because in the embedded world, Raspberry Pis, Jetson Nanos, and Intel NUCs, and all the other, what do I have next to me today? A Rock Pi. They all build an OS that is fully featured, and that's great, and it makes it easy to use for the individual. But when you're talking about an IoT device and it's sitting out in the field, you don't really need Firefox installed on that device, or it doesn't need a desktop. All of those, they're just all, extra security vectors that you need to be worried about. So Balena OS, built on Yocto Linux, is minimal by design. The smaller footprint also then means that it has lower RAM and resource requirements. We include redundant rootfs partitions, so an A side and a B side, which means if you go to do a deployment or an upgrade and things don't go quite according to plans, it will fall back and revert to the previous known good installation. And minimization of SD card writes. SD cards, I can promise you, after years of doing IoT work, SD cards fail. There's no way around it. And there's some tricks to help extend the lifespan of them. And so certainly minimizing the amount that you are writing to disk is one way. Next one up is Balena Engine. I talked about this for a moment earlier as well. Everything in the Balena ecosystem is intended to be run in containers. The OS includes the engine. The engine is built on Moby, which is the open source contribution from Docker. And what that means is we've taken Docker's work, slimmed it down for an IoT use case. Again, minimal by design because of the lower RAM and resource requirement or resources that are available on IoT devices. I mean, a Raspberry Pi Zero has 512 megs of RAM. Docker was written with the data center in mind. They assume things like stable power, stable internet. Those are luxuries that IoT devices do not have. So, again, similarly, the engine is sort of tuned for the smaller devices. And there's an important one there on that third bullet point about delta pools to save on bandwidth. That's actually really important for devices that are in the far edge where you don't have Wi-Fi or Ethernet. You may not even have 4G or LTE connectivity. I was traveling over the weekend. I was down in Arizona, where I'm normally based, and I was up in the mountains, and I happened to notice my phone go through some areas that were only 3G coverage, and I know that there's some areas that are still only on 2G. Okay. The reason that is important then is, let's say you do have an edge AI application, and those containers get to be pretty big. Jetson Nano CUDA-enabled containers could be multiple gigs. You don't want to push multiple gigs over a 2G or 3G cellular connection if you can avoid it. What you do is download the container at home base on the device, on Wi-Fi. Get the device out into the field, and when you make updates and you go to push a new container to the device, it will only push what has changed between the original and the target container. So it'll do a delta binary and send only the difference. It's very, very important on cellular. You get a little bit of an architecture diagram here. Underlying, you boot the SD card, it's running Balena OS. The engine starts up. It begins running its containers, and it's scalable from 1, 2, 2,000, 20,000, 200,000, doesn't matter. Just keep on pushing. All right, I'll go real quickly through the workflow. I am looking at the clock. I see over here, 10:17. All right, we're good. All right, the workflow. Very first thing you do is create an account. That's easy enough. Create your application. Actually, I need to rename this slide because we just renamed this to fleets. Create a fleet. Add your devices to the fleet and then push your code. So in practice, go to the balena.io site, sign up, get logged in, add your new device. You can see what that looks like. And you see that blue button there at the bottom is download Balena OS. That'll just download your SD card image. You know what to do with that. Fire up Etcher, flash it, get it into the device, turn it on. It'll join up to its associated fleet like we showed earlier, and you can then drill into it and it'll be there. Now, at this point, it does not have any containers on it yet. This is just the device brought up. The next piece in the puzzle is build your container. And we have some tooling in place for that. It's a CLI that allows you to push your containers onto the fleet of devices then. Now, when I'm talking about pushing a container is generated from a Docker file. You can see here an example of a Docker file. This is a little application, sort of a mashup of Datadog and Kerberos. Kerberos is a open source video, like camera surveillance kind of security camera app. It's pretty neat. Customers, they have, they have applications doing pretty much anything you can imagine. There are kiosk customers, there are customers doing robotics, there are customers doing edge AI, there are customers doing self-driving and autonomous vehicles, there's customers in infrastructure and environment, so their Docker files are probably going to be dramatically different, but at the end of the day, the concept is the same. Generate your Docker file, and then use the CLI to run a Balena push. and you can kind of see it starting to fire off here in this screenshot. It basically bundles up your Docker file, pushes it up to the cloud to be built, and then Balena Cloud will orchestrate it and send it out to all of the devices that are in the fleet. And there's some controls to granularly manipulate that process, only update these devices or only send this particular build to devices in, a certain geography or whatever. So you can kind of manage and manipulate that as you segment your fleet out. But, once you've got your container built and onto the device, what the device is doing, like I said, is kind of up to the customer. Here's an example of some logging being done in Datadog. There's the example of the Kerberos application. It's a back window view out of the house. It's really up to the customer to determine what it is that they are pushing out to their fleet. Already had that one. So I want to cover, just in the remaining time, a quick bit about the pieces that go into this. Paul, any other questions roll in? Take a look. I'm not seeing anything there. Okay, good. All right, so the bits and pieces that we covered, Balena OS, that's open source. You can take that right now from GitHub and you can use just the OS, flash it to an SD card, never ever connect it to Balena Cloud, and just run a small, minimal Yocto-based operating system on your devices. I think there's about 70 or so devices that we support. You can take a look here. That's the Balena Jetson repo. You can see there's configuration files in it for different types of devices. You can kind of poke around in GitHub in that Balena OS repo, but they're all open source. Have at it. We hope you would connect them up to Balena Cloud, but if not, then, we have users out there that just use the OS, and that's the beauty of open source. We are relying on Yocto, so the right thing to do is to also make Balena OS open source. Same thing for the engine. There are folks out there that don't want to run Docker because it is, again, intended for the data center. Maybe they have smaller devices or, more modest needs. And they go out, grab Balena engine, install it on their devices. You can run it on Raspbian, you can run it on Windows, whatever. And it will fire up and manage the containers that a customer, or I shouldn't say customer, because they would just be a user at that point. So that's also open source. You can go grab it right out of GitHub and away you go. You can see here there's 1,818 contributors to Balena engine. That's, again, because it's a fork from Moby. It's not all 1,818 employees of Balena. As I said, we only have about 100. But hey, if we're drawing from the open source community, we want to give back to the open source community. Etcher, of course, already talked about that one. It's also open source. There are folks out there that take it, tweak it, customize it, and bundle it into their own applications. Fantastic. I showed off Balena Cloud and its capabilities, but the core underlying architecture is also open source. That dashboard that I showed off and the management of the devices through a web interface, that is really, truly the only closed source piece of the puzzle. But Open Balena can be used to manage fleets from a CLI. And the same bits and pieces that enable Balena Cloud to do what it does are all here in Open Balena as well. Connect to devices no matter where they're located, push containers onto devices. It's all CLI driven, but it works quite the same. and it's self-hosted. So you install it on a server of your own, and then you can manage those devices, and devices can move between Open Balena and Balena Cloud. So you can kind of take it and run with it as well. And time for questions, huh? I think that's about it anyways from me. I don't see anything that rolled in. So that was the 25-minute high level. What is Balena?
That was lightning fast for the amount of tools that you guys have.
Yeah.
That was seriously impressive, David.
Yeah.
We don't have any questions coming through just yet. If anybody does have any questions, please do put them in the comments, and we'll get David to answer them straight away. John, does anything spring to mind from yourself?
Do you have any customers doing it in a continuous deployment manner? So they check in their code, it gets built, the container gets built and then pushed down to either test or even
yes, there
devices.
are customers that are doing that. We don't offer in and of ourselves a model or methodology for that. The customers will set that up themselves. They'll have their own pipeline that they'll go through, typically some QA or some sort of self-checks, self-certifications, and things like that. They'll basically have to put us at the end of that pipeline then. So once they've done their work, they've gone through their bits and pieces and QA and, gone through their CI/CD pipeline internally. The end result of that then is fire it off to the Balena Cloud Builder to be built and distributed to the devices. So it's a little bit before we get involved mostly. But yeah, there are certainly customers out there that have set that up. They can, once they push to GitHub and something gets checked in there, it triggers the automation to send, to our builders to be distributed out.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
We have a question come through from Charles Sellers. I know it says LinkedIn user there, but I've just checked on LinkedIn to see who it is. Hi, Charles. Thanks for joining. What do you think enabling open source costs the company in lost?
That's a tough one. There's no way for us to track specifically how many dollars in revenue. No idea. That's okay, though. I don't mind saying that we don't know. And I also don't mind that there is lost revenue from open source versus the commercial offering. Because at our point in our life cycle, we're a young company. Really what we care about is awareness and just having users using those open source projects. Hopefully that translates to future growth, right? So we take software from the open source community, okay? Yocto and Moby were contributed to the open source community. That's the right thing to do, is to continue to provide to the open source community. And that awareness, if they can run Balena Engine on their own device and that's all, then fine. But, hey, maybe they have conversations with their colleagues. Maybe I don't know if dinner parties are ever going to come back, but if they're ever a thing, maybe they mention, that they're using some software and some technology from Balena, and then that person goes and checks it out and becomes we don't have any way to track that. I have no idea if somebody has a dinner conversation and, 6 months down the road, we gain a customer because of that. That doesn't show up in the funnel. So, I don't have we lost X number of dollars in revenue answer, but it doesn't matter. It's worth it in the end. The investment is worth it.
I think it's one of the things of like a bit of a change from capitalism to sort of open innovation.
Yeah.
And one of the terms I love that I've heard over the years is business karma. That when you build as a community with open source and stuff, and then you enable people with foundations and building blocks that they can build on top of. Guess what? Your source is within that then they build trust that you can then start to build out from that. And then, there's companies in Newcastle here like IoTech that's built on their technology is built on the open source of EdgeX Foundry. And then they've built on top of that and they charge for that service, but they also contribute back into the open source side of things. And I think it's my personal view is it's how we accelerate in this technology as quick and as effectively as we can with really good, solid, stable stuff, because people are personally committed into it. The developers are really committed into the success of it. That's
totally
my
true.
view.
Totally,
right,
totally. It's a great one. So that's it. Whirlwind tour of the ecosystem.
Indeed. We're now at that point that we will hand over to Stephen. Thanks, David. That was absolutely awesome, mate. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem.
Okay, Stephen, I'm going to bring your screen in for you if you want to put it onto your full screen, because I can see your side notes.
Is that
there we go. Yeah.
There we go.
There it is.
It might come as a shock to some of you on the call after seeing me trying to share my screen there that my background isn't technical. So my name's Stephen Tulip. I'm from ACT, the App Association, and my background is in membership bodies. And I've been lucky enough to spend a lot of years working previously with manufacturing businesses. So I got to basically spend my days going around the UK, poking my nose into innovative SME businesses and seeing the really, innovative technologies they were coming up with and the tech and software businesses that were supporting them. So IoT is something that is kind of the lifeblood of innovation almost when you think about things like the fourth industrial revolution. And my current role at ACT is only 4 months old. We've launched ACT in the UK 4 months ago with me. And cards on the table, if you'd have told me 4 months ago to sit and listen to somebody talk about IP law, that would not have sounded appealing. And because let's be honest, IP law is difficult, it's confusing, and dare I say it, a bit dull. So I'm here to reassure you that, first of all, this is going to be a really high level run through. I'm not an IP lawyer. I'm not going to be going into the details of it. We're talking about the bits of it that are relevant to your business. So first of all, talking about the Internet of Things itself. So makers of IoT connected devices or software are part of the mobile economy, which is a £1.2 trillion ecosystem. And as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, the IoT economy is expected to be worth £10 trillion by 2030, which to me sounds like a very good business to be a part of. And the IoT sector is booming, driven by the fourth industrial revolution and COVID-19. There's a lot of businesses that we talk to who've done clever things like making Bluetooth proximity sensors, for example, for building sites to ensure that people are socially distancing, and lots of other clever innovations as well. And IoT is an ecosystem. The small and medium enterprise, the SMEs, are crucial to its success. And I think that's important because when people think about tech, they tend to think about Apple's, they tend to think about Google's and Microsoft's, but actually the real innovation and lifeblood comes from SMEs. Now, this slide, given my audience, is one that I don't need to explain to you all because you're all IoT experts. But I've left it in there because when I'm talking to policymakers in particular, when they think of IoT, they maybe think about Alexas, they think of smart kettles, occasionally they'll think of Apple Watches, but what they don't do is think of, smart factories. They don't think about connected logistics. They don't think about connected healthcare. They don't think about automotive. They don't think about the software that drives all of it, because for every device manufacturer that makes a physical IoT connected device, there's another business that is making a software product that uses that data and does something clever with it, with AR, VR, or AI, whatever it might be. So to me, as in my non-tech background, the important thing about IoT is connectivity. It's the ability to wirelessly connect physical resources to the internet. And without it, there really is no Internet of Things. So the question is, how would your business perform if your products couldn't connect to the internet or access data collected by those connections? And this is where standard essential patents come in. So standard essential patents are often SEPs, are often referred to as SEPs, So we'll call them SEPs from here on in. So when you hear SEPs, it's a standard essential patent. So before talking about the specifics, it's kind of important to get your head around how patents work generally. And so let's imagine this lovely Lego house is the first Lego house that's ever existed. And somebody has gone, I've invented a Lego house. I'm going to patent that as a new innovation. But if you look more closely, the Lego house is made up of bricks, which someone else had patented, and windows, which someone else had patented. So when you think of new technologies being built on the technology that went before, it's not just inspired by. A lot of technologies are quite literally new configurations of pre-existing, pre-patented technologies put together to create something new. In this case, a Lego house. So when you've got your new technology and everyone starts using it, you get to call it a standardized technology. And so examples that would be USB, Wi-Fi, I'm looking around me, QWERTY keyboards is another one, Bluetooth. These are technologies that are so widely used that they just become the standard. And so if you have a new innovation that you think is essential to that standard operating, you can declare your patent as a standard essential patent. So let's take 4G, for example. If you hold a technology that 4G simply could not work without, you declare that as a standard essential patent. And why would you do that? Well, in return for doing that, you get access to a much wider marketplace, i.e. everyone who wants to use 4G. And in return, you say that you're going to license that technology on what's called fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms, which is often shortened to FRAND. So in return for charging slightly less, and in turn for making sure that the price you charge is fair, and in turn for not discriminating who you sell it to, you get access to a much, much wider user base for your technology. So if we go back to the Lego house analogy, if the Lego house is a standard essential, if the Lego house is the standard technology, the standard essential patents, the SEPs, are the bricks that make it up. They're interconnected. So why do they matter? So if you're innovating in the IoT space, you need to use standardized technologies to make it work. Some standard technologies like Bluetooth are free, others are paid for, and 4G and 5G are really good examples of paid for technologies. And it's not like you can make an alternative. You can't come up with your own, Betamax version of an internet connection because it just simply won't interact with other devices. You have to use one of these standard technologies. And so if you're going to use those technologies, you need to agree a fee to license the standard essential patents that is fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. So if you think about these standard essential patents as being the building blocks of the standard technologies, if you're not able to access one of those standard essential patents, you can't access the technology that it's part of. If you can't access the bricks, you can't build the house. And the problem is, a lot of businesses use these technologies without knowing about this. I mean, I didn't know about it until 4 months ago. And if you don't properly license your standard essential patents, you can face an unexpected bill. You get a letter through the door saying, actually, you owe us royalties. So here's a big bill for the royalties you owe us up to this point and ongoing. You owe us a percentage of your profits. Or even you can be presented with an injunction, which tells you that you can't sell the product that uses the patent until the issue is resolved, which is obviously hugely damaging to your business. And sometimes you've got no choice but to use a standard technology because of legislation. So if you think about cars, my personal car is a bit older rubbish, but if you've got a new car, when you have an accident, it automatically calls the emergency services and tells them where you are. It does that using the Internet of Things and connectivity. So if you're a car maker, you have to use 4G or 5G in your products. You have no choice. So if you're having difficulties accessing standard essential patents, or if you're subject to an injunction because of those complexities, then you can see how that would be very problematic. So quickly on the pros and cons of standard essential patents, because we're highlighting the risks of them here, but there are a lot of benefits too. So it can make licensing patents for the technologies you need a lot more simple, because the process of doing it is unified. So everyone you need, you kind of go through the same process. A lot of the patents are held by organizations called patent pools. So there is an organization, for example, that holds most of the automotive patents. So if you're making an automotive related product, you go to this one organization and it's a one-stop shop. Saves you having to negotiate with several individual patent holders. That's good for businesses. Royalties should be agreed under these FRAND terms, so they should be fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. And if you're an innovator and you come up with a technology that can be part of the standard technology, you get to benefit from this system. But there are issues here with this system, and the main one is a power imbalance. So most standard essential patents are held even by huge multinational organizations that exist to enforce their rights over these patents. And, you know, there is absolutely no issue with companies profiting from their innovation. It's the lifeblood of innovation, in fact. But there is a problem when there's a power imbalance. So what can happen is that because the companies that hold the patents are very large, very litigious, have lots of lawyers, etc., if you're an SME trying to enter into a negotiation, it's kind of weighed against you. And that's multiplied because the rules around this term FRAND are vague, and so they're open to abuse. So if negotiations break down, your only real remedy is a court case. And there's a couple of issues with this. One, court cases are really expensive, so most SMEs don't have the resources or the in-house expertise to deal with it. And also what this means is that the rules that govern the fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory terms are set by court decisions. They're set by precedent. And this has so far excluded SMEs from the rulemaking process because the vast majority of these cases never make it to court because it's expensive and because it's difficult. They get settled out of court, so no rules are set. And the ones that do go to court are huge companies, you know, like Daimler or Huawei or Apple, companies of that sort of scale. And so while they're shaping the rules, that doesn't really necessarily mean the rules work for SMEs. So just focusing on the key issue for SMEs here, it's easy to fall foul of rules that you're not aware of. If this is the first time you're hearing about standard essential patents and you use 3G, 4G, Wi-Fi, whatever it is for your products to connect to other products or to software, you could well be falling foul of these rules. You might not have in-house expertise, which creates an additional cost, and profitability of new products can be impacted by royalty fees. So if you're designing a new product and you suddenly have to calculate this SEP royalty into it, that might mean the calculation isn't as beneficial as it once was. We've talked about the resources for expensive court cases and the fact you can be subject to bills or injunctions that stop you selling your product. But one of the interesting quirks of this court case scenario is that because it's only the Daimlers of this world that go to court, what often happens is SMEs are routinely overcharged the percentage they should pay for their royalty. And the reason for this is that when the big court cases go live, the companies that hold the standard essential patents can say, well, on average, this is what we charge our customers. So Daimler, you need to pay us this higher percentage. So it's another area where SMEs are vulnerable to what's termed patent abuse. So the devil's in the details, and this is where we get to the what you can do about it stage. So look at where in your supply chain should the standard essential patent be licensed. So it's a royalty, remember, and a royalty is a percentage. So if you're making a complex product, it is better for that royalty to sit on the widget rather than the car. You want it on the smallest sellable unit. And that means you have to know who is responsible for it, and you have to have that contractually agreed who is responsible for it. And what's the geographical area and time span for which you can license a standard essential patent? You don't want to license for more than you need. So if you're a small business and you've got and you're only selling into a couple of countries, you don't want to be licensing, globally. You don't want to be licensing for continents that you're not selling into and won't be selling into soon. And will you be forced to license other patents as well if the SEP is part of a patent pool or portfolio? And again, this is about not paying for more than you need. And this is a really important one. Even if you think your license is covered by your supplier, double check, because that might not be the case. And surprises can be extremely costly and destructive, because what will happen is you'll get a letter through the post one day. And if you're not aware of this, even if your license is covered by a supplier, you're going to spend a lot of time and money finding that out. So it's better to find that out soon. And again, if you're found to be incorrectly using a patent, you can be subject to an injunction stopping you selling your product in certain territories. So it's well worth being aware of this. So that was a little bit doom and gloom, and we're going to focus back on the positives. So standard essential patents are good. They are the building blocks of standard technologies, and used properly, they are an easy way, a relatively easy way, to access the technologies that you need to make Internet of Things products. And as we've already talked about, with it being worth, multiple trillion pounds by 2030, IT innovation is good. It's a good business. Absolutely don't let me put you off from doing it by mentioning these patent rules. And in fact, the recent UK innovation strategy has SME innovation at its centre, and there is a number of consultations coming up from government that are going to focus on exactly how things like standard essential patents can be easier and more transparent for SME businesses. So there's a real will there to make this whole process easier. And while these issues can be a barrier to IoT innovation, by working together and raising awareness like we're doing today, you can overcome it. I'm sure a lot of you work for smaller businesses. You've got a lot of challenges to overcome day to day. This is just another one. It is not insurmountable. And in fact, I was found out today that there is support available. So if you're in the UK, the Intellectual Property Office has a current funding pot that lets you have a free or heavily discounted IP audit on your business. So if you're wondering whether this affects you, look up IPO IP audit, and you'll be able to get some funding to help you out with that, which is, I think, very useful indeed. So finally, just to sort of talk a little bit about the association I'm a member of. I mentioned we only launched in the UK 4 months ago, but we have been around in America since the 90s. We're founded by software developers, and we're a community of 5,000 plus software and device manufacturers around the world. We inform our members around SEP issues with briefings, guidance, and events, keep people up to date with policy developments in the UK, EU, and US. A lot of what my job is putting our members in touch with policymakers to make sure that those decisions that come down the line are beneficial, and in a very sort of open source way, based on what the previous speakers were talking about, it's all free. So we're not a money making organization. We're there to sort of educate and support SMEs to tackle these issues. And finally, this awful slide is a reminder to me. You will have received an email from Paul in the week about a roundtable that we're hosting with the Competition and Markets Authority. So if you're an app developer and if you sell your apps on either the App Store or the Google Play Store, the CMA are looking at how they regulate those marketplaces and whether or not businesses are unfairly taxed, I suppose, for having to use them. And a lot of the evidence that's been given so far are from large companies, and we're trying to ensure that the SME voice is heard in there as well. So if you would like to participate in that roundtable, you've got my email address. It's on the slides as well. Drop me a note, and it'd be really good to have you be part of it. It's on the 12th of October and held virtually. But that is it from me. My contact details are there. I'm going to try and work out how to stop sharing it and ask if there's any questions. Hello, are we there? What about the manufacturer of the module? Do they also have to pay? So that depends. So if you, so it only needs to be licensed once. And if you are the prime company, let's use cars as an example. If you're Mercedes, if you're making your new car, you absolutely don't want to be paying the royalty based on that, because a percentage of a 50 grand Mercedes is a lot worse than paying the percentage of a module. So most module suppliers will be pushed by the companies they supply to license it themselves, and that'll be part of the pricing structure. So to answer, yes, the module supply does do it, but it only needs to happen once, and that should be part of your pricing arrangements. If you're selling something that includes an off-the-shelf Wi-Fi or Bluetooth module, do you need to apply to use one of these steps? No. So if it's off the shelf, depending on how you procured it, that's already covered. So if you are buying, if you're going into Currys or whatever and buying a sensor, that's not covered. Where it becomes interesting is if you are, I suppose, doing something different with it. So let's say you are making an example of one of our members. They make sensors for logistics, so they use 5G. They use 5G chips that you can just buy off the shelf. But what they then did is dismantle that and then built it back using the core technologies, but they made it more robust. They made it rubberized. They made it so that it was drop-proof and shake-proof, etc. They've changed it so that they've changed it enough that it isn't an off-the-shelf product anymore, and they do have to pay for it.
Brilliant.
Any other questions? Sorry.
Yeah. How does the supply chain prevent fees being paid multiple times?
So that's an interesting one, because the way that this works a lot of the time is that the people who hold these patents will just send letters out to people that they think are breaking them, because you wouldn't you? Say, oh, we noticed you using one of them. We think you might be doing this wrong. You owe us loads of money if you are. So the onus is on the supply chain to manage that risk. And there's companies we've talked with where there's been multiple businesses in the supply chain that have had that letter, and that kind of comes into the extra cost bit, because you're having to sort that out. You're having to work that out. You're having to go through down the supply chain, work out who holds the license, work out who should have it, work out who's paid it, etc. So that's why having that in advance, and when you're innovating new products, making it part of your dealings at the start, makes all that out. A bit like the TV license, yeah, a little bit. Although I haven't seen a van outside anyone's factory yet, but it's probably only a matter of time. But yeah, the take home is just be aware where you are with these things. It's not an issue. If you know where you are, when that letter arrives, you can just say, no thanks, that's not with me, and send it back.
A statement there with Chinese modules as well. I think everybody globally is responsible for this, aren't they?
They are. And yeah. Okay, just one final point. So if let's say you are let's say you make a mobile phone or whatever it might be, that obviously uses 4G or 5G, and you sell that in multiple countries, and patents by their nature are geographical. So, you license it in multiple countries. So what you could end up is having different court cases in different countries, depending on the patents you've done.
Hi, Dick. Great to have you online again. When inserting a COTS solution, typically from overseas, as part of an IoT innovation system, how do you check if this might be a breach of current regulations?
I'll tell you what, you're going to have to help me with the acronym there. What's COTS?
Dick, COTS. John, do you know?
I know it.
I'm struggling with that.
Commercial off the shelf.
Oh.
Gotcha.
Again, if it's commercial off the shelf, even if it's overseas, if you are not messing about with it, then it should be fine. It should be fine. Because when you're thinking about automotive, and sorry I keep using this example, it's just the best one because the supply chains are so linked. The company that supplies Mercedes with their 4G widgets, it's not just an off-the-shelf product, it's been designed and then manufacturing it, so it's not off the shelf. But if you're off the shelf, you're fine. If you're just buying something lock stock and using it as intended by the seller, that it's not an issue.
And if that's incorrect, just go back to Stephen and just say it was Stephen that said that was okay. I'm only joking. Remove all liability from Paul's silly statement. We have another one. Okay. CJC, what's your name, by the way? Please do share. Who would be legally responsible for any breach? Good question.
Well, again, this is where the court cases come in, because if it isn't in your contracts anywhere, if you haven't got it bolted down, the patent holder will be saying, well, it's the person who sells the most expensive thing. Thank you very much. And the innovator would be saying, well, actually, it's the person who sells the cheapest thing. And that's where these out-of-court settlements come in. And that's, again, the problem with it being vague. And what will happen a lot of the time is that the company that owns the patent will say, all right, we're not going to take a percentage of your big product, but we're going to take a pretty hefty sum off you to make this go away. And that's, again, that power imbalance vulnerability of SMEs. Hi, Chris. Is there any more for any more? Oh, sorry, Paul. I don't know if that was just me, but I couldn't hear you then.
Does anybody else have questions? Because I'm silly and I put myself on mute. No. Okay. Hey, Stephen, David, thanks very much. It's really appreciated.
Great talks, very interesting.
Managed to
Thank
do
you,
this in
guys.
the time scales that we had. I appreciate you both have places to get to. Just a quick update from ourselves. We've got some special shows coming along with Northumbrian Water for their Innovation Festival. If you aren't aware of the Innovation Festival with Northumbrian Water, here is the link. I'm going to try and copy and put that into the chat as well, into the comments, so it's easy to select. This festival is a great opportunity for anybody and anything doing with data, IoT. They've got a huge amount of sprints over the course of a whole week. The event is virtual as well as in person. They've got a number of contributors from across the world. They have stuff that they need help with ASAP in regards to sensors, data management, and everything else that is just completely 101 in IoT. And evidently, it's a business. It has money. It's not as if you're going to be doing stuff for free as well. So they do some sprints and stuff. You'll find out more, so keep an eye out for those shows coming through over the next couple of weeks. What else do we have? And we have our forum, which is sponsored by DigiKey. They have some new content on there, so please do go to the forum. It's free to register and access. If you'd like to create content, just get in touch with the administrator. We'll give you access to be able to put content on there, create your own little area, and start some discussions. We've got a few colleges that are interested in joining and hearing about what tools to use, how to get started, all the good stuff. So please do help those. forum.iotnorth.uk. If you have IoT solutions, go to, where's it at? Our marketplace, iotnorth.uk/marketplace. Register your solution, and we will push it across our social profiles to drive customers your way. And again, that is another free service and another free thing that we do because we love you, because we want to just connect everything and everybody. And on that note, without sounding too soppy, I will see you in the next couple of weeks with some more shows. We're organised in November, which we'll announce in the next week or so. John, David, Stephen, thanks very much, and good night.
Thank you all.